I just had a brainstorm one day and thought, boy, wouldn't it be really nice to have a chart where I could really see how each color affects the other. And so I started working on this. What I did was I painted one row a day for a month. And I just put the music on, and it was very peaceful, and it was really nice. I didn't have to agonize over composition or anything, and I really enjoyed making it. As I've arranged the colors sort of in the rainbow order, and if you look on the chart, which I don't know, some of you have a chart, over here I call these the dominant colors, and down below the mixing colors. Now, they're the same colors, but in the mixture, these colors dominate. Here I reversed it. But anyway, okay, so, magenta. If you mix magenta with cobalt teal, okay, that's the color you'll get, with magenta being the dominant color, meaning that there's more magenta than cobalt teal in the mix. Yeah.
Is this basically half and half you're mixing?
Right. Well, it's funny. People ask me, what proportions do you use? But basically, you can't think that way because every pigment is different. Like some pigments, like red oxide or cadmium red, are so strong you only need a tiny little bit. Whereas some pigments like cerulean blue, you have to put practically a whole tube into the mix. So you really have to use your eye. But basically, if you're mixing a yellow and a blue, if the yellow is the dominant color, you start with the yellow. Then you add a little bit of blue, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, until you get a green that still looks like a yellow green. If you go too far, if you for any reason want that specific color, and it becomes too blue, then just add more yellow. It's just you have to use your eye. And so magenta with cobalt teal gives you that color. But if you mix magenta with cobalt teal as the dominant color, it's more blue. See, so there's a difference. See, that has much more magenta in it.
Yeah.
And that one has more teal in it.
Yeah.
So when you look at the dominant color, that means that's the color I started with. And then these are the colors that I mixed into that color. So that's what I mean by dominant color. Now, dominant colors are really, it's a very useful thing to know because yesterday a woman asked me, I don't know if you're here, she said, I was thinking of mixing a little bit of black into all of the colors that I'm using for a painting. What do you think of that? And I said, well, then black is essentially your dominant color. You could use any color. You could mix a little bit of red into all of your colors. What it does is it creates unity, because then all the colors have that in common. They all have a little bit of red in them. So it creates unity in a painting. It helps to create atmosphere. Again, like the rose-colored glasses, if you're looking at the world through tinted glasses, everything will have a little bit of that tint. If you have a painting that has a blue atmosphere, well, blue is the dominant color, and blue is probably in just about every color that I've mixed on that canvas. So they say, well, I don't have this exact color, or I can't find that pigment, and I just say to them, look, it's an art, it's fun, it's not a science. This is just a reference guide. It's just one of many tools that is handy to have for many reasons. So don't worry about it. Don't go out and buy another tube just because it's not the exact pigment. If it's close, this is all, everything's in relation to everything else. So, it's just a tool. It's not a science. Have fun with it. If you wanted a painting that was harmonious and unified and had atmosphere, that's one way of doing it. Yeah.
But not necessarily.
But not necessarily. And another thing that this is very useful if you picking, like I call them color families. Like you can say, oh, I want to do a painting that's in this family here. And that's where you have dominant, the colors are reds and yellows, and they're all related as well. You could be, if you wanted to be, try it, you could create a painting just using one row or two rows, or you could pick a green row and a red row. And just play with that. It just kind of shows you all the possibilities of what you can do with that one green. You can get all those colors and more, and that's just the beginning. You can get thousands of colors, But it's about intentionality. It's saying, okay, I'm going to create a painting that has, unity and a dominant color, and that's your intention. And then you get creative and play with it. But I with a lot of these, they come out of the tube looking like black, so I've added white to a lot of these just to keep them. I didn't make them all exactly the same value because I just didn't think it was necessary. But so some of these are lightened up. But yeah, these are all the earthy colors over here.
Used together?
Well, first of all, that's the great thing about art. I don't think the word shouldn't exists at all.
You're right.
No. Even back when I was in school, they said, oh, you shouldn't use black.
Right.
Because, and there's a point, because instead of just using black, you can make wonderful blacks that are much more luminous and rich, mixing red and green together, or purple and yellow, or orange and blue, and you can get much more interesting blacks. But I love black. I use black all the time. Black is drama. The other day I was working and a painting wasn't going well, so I covered half of it in black. Is like using colors that are close to each other on the color wheel. If you mix like oranges and yellows, it stays very light and luminous. But you can see when you're mixing like greens and reds, it gets very gray and dulled down. Here you got blue and orange are complements. And see how gray it gets? But those are beautiful colors. They're wonderful colors. And dulls work great with bright colors. They balance each other out nicely.
Especially the background.